They came to explore the American desert. A family of 4, 2 parents and their young sons, vanished without a trace. Their rental van was found abandoned deep in Death Valley, locked, untouched, as if they'd simply stepped out and disappeared into the heat. No footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing. For 13 years the desert kept their secret, until something chilling surfaced. But even now, decades later, the mystery still breathes, because the parents were found, the children never were. And the deeper you go into this case, the more the ground seems to whisper, someone else was out there. They came in search of adventure. The kind you dream about when your life feels too predictable, too polished, too quiet. It was July 1996 when Egbert and Cornelia Munig, a couple from Dresden, Germany, packed their belongings, strapped their 2 sons into the back seat, and drove into the heart of Death Valley, California. Their boys, Georg and Max, were just 10 and 4, too young to fully understand the silence of the desert, the scale of the wilderness, or the danger it quietly held. The family was on vacation. It was supposed to be a dream trip across the American Southwest, wide highways, dusty canyons, photographs beneath vast blue skies. But what started as postcards and souvenirs ended in something far darker, something still unanswered. No one expected what came next. Before they entered the park, they were just another family of 4, smiling for photos, buying gas station snacks, scribbling postcards in blocky German handwriting. They'd landed in Los Angeles on July 8th, rented a minivan, and began a long hot road trip through California and Nevada. They kept to themselves. Quiet, neat, polite, the type of tourists you barely remember, until they don't come back. They stayed in Las Vegas for a few days, then moved west toward Death Valley, a place of extremes. In July, the heat crushes the air, sometimes pushing past 120 degrees Celsius. Even in a car it seeps in. Water evaporates faster than sweat. Electronics melt down. And yet, people still go. For the silence, for the thrill, for the illusion that they're alone in a place that has swallowed thousands before them. The last confirmed sighting of the Munigs came on July 23rd, when they checked out of a motel in the town of Beatty, Nevada, near the eastern entrance to the park. They were calm, friendly, said they were headed into Death Valley for the day. And then, nothing. No calls, no check-ins, no credit card activity, just 4 names that would echo for years. At first, no one noticed. It was only when the family failed to show up for their flight back to Germany that concern started to ripple. It wasn't like them. They were organized, punctual. They had return tickets, hotel bookings. Every part of their trip had been carefully planned. The German consulate was alerted. Local authorities got involved. And slowly what had seemed like a simple oversight began to twist into something stranger. The family had vanished, and no one had any idea where they'd gone. The search began quietly, with missing persons reports filed in Los Angeles and Nevada. But with no cell signal history, no GPS records, and a desert the size of Connecticut, the odds were stacked high against anyone finding a clue. That changed in October 1996, months after they vanished, when their minivan was found abandoned in a remote canyon in the park. A place so isolated, even experienced hikers rarely passed through it. It was stuck in a dry wash, tires buried, doors locked. Inside they found luggage, German snacks, empty water bottles, a neatly folded road map. The car battery was dead, but strangely, nothing seemed ransacked. There was no sign of struggle, no sign of panic. And then something chilling. On the map, the family had drawn a line in ink. A handwritten note in German beside it read, "We are going over the hill." But what hill? And why? Rescue teams combed the area for days. Helicopters flew grid patterns. Volunteers on foot traced ancient dry riverbeds. Nothing. Not a footprint, not a scrap of clothing, not even a bone. The desert had taken them and left no trace behind. Park rangers speculated they'd tried to hike out after the car became stuck, possibly in the middle of the day, with no shelter and not enough water. That kind of mistake, in Death Valley, isn't just fatal. It's erasing. But that explanation didn't sit right with everyone. Why drive so deep into an unpaved area of the park in a rental car? Why lock the doors before leaving? Why leave their passports, water, and car keys behind? And perhaps the biggest question, why would two parents with small children decide to hike into 115-degree heat, knowing they were completely off the main route? No one could answer. Over time, the search faded. The rangers returned to their usual patrols. The park visitors came and went, and the case of the missing German family quietly joined the long list of desert disappearances, strange, tragic, unsolved. But their story didn't rest. Every year, as the heat returned, hikers whispered about the family. Locals pointed out the dry wash where the van was found. Some believed they'd been met with foul play, bandits, a criminal encounter. Others thought it was a case of panic and poor decisions. But everyone agreed on one thing. Something about the case didn't make sense, and the desert never gave up its secrets easily. 13 years would pass before anything surfaced. 13 long summers of silence. The boys' names etched in fading ink on missing persons flyers, the parents' faces slowly vanishing from memory. Until one day, someone found something. But that's not this part of the story. This is the part where they were still together, still laughing in the car, still taking photos, still trusting the road ahead. This is the part where no one knew they were about to vanish, forever. The sun scorched the valley floor, as if trying to burn away all traces of what had happened. The van sat half swallowed in sand, its tires embedded in the dry wash like a fossil. The heat rippled off the rocks, and the silence was so complete it felt unnatural. No wind, no birds, no movement, just absence. When rescuers found the vehicle, they knew instantly that something was wrong. This wasn't a place casual tourists found themselves by accident. The road that led there, Anvil Canyon, wasn't even marked on most maps. A twisting, unpaved track designed for four-wheel drives and survivalists, not for a rental minivan with two young children in the back seat. But there it was, and it had been there for months, baking under the brutal sun. Inside the van, searchers found luggage, baby wipes, food wrappers, and a sleeping bag. Everything carefully arranged, everything undisturbed. There were no signs of violence, no shattered glass, no blood, nothing to suggest fear or flight. And yet, they were gone. They had taken nothing that would have helped them survive. No water, no supplies, no shelter, only the vague note left behind on the map. "We are going over the hill." A message that felt more like a final whisper than a plan. Authorities launched a renewed search. Helicopters scanned the hills and ravines, their shadows crawling across jagged rock and ancient dry creeks. Ground teams pushed deeper into the wilderness, faces wrapped in cloth to guard against the furnace air. They searched for bones, for scraps, for any trace of 4 lives that had once breathed and walked this desert. They found nothing. It didn't make sense. Even in Death Valley, bodies leave signs. Bones bleach in the sun, clothing snags on cactus or creosote bush, shoes mark the sand. But here, there was no trail, as if they had vanished just beyond the curve of the land. The media picked up the story, calling them the Death Valley Germans. It was a name that stuck, even as details remained scarce. Theories sprouted like weeds. Was it a crime? A mistake? A secret the family had been hiding? Park rangers leaned toward the simplest explanation. The family had panicked after the van got stuck and attempted to walk out. But even that theory collapsed under scrutiny. Why would two parents with children walk into the most brutal part of the park during peak heat? Why abandon water and shelter? Why go over the hill when they could have stayed with the van, which was in no immediate danger? Some began to suspect that something else had happened, something darker. Rumors spread that drug traffickers or smugglers might have encountered the family, that they were forced from the van, that someone out there didn't want them to be found. Others suggested the family had stumbled upon something they weren't supposed to see, an illegal operation or a private meeting in a forgotten canyon. the kind of place only shadows knew about. But there was no proof, just whispers. Time passed. The trail grew colder with each sunrise. Eventually, the case slipped into the background noise of unsolved disappearances, a cold file in a drawer, a forgotten headline, until 2009. Two hikers, Tom Mahood and Les Walker, were deep in the park, exploring Anvil Canyon's outer reaches. They weren't looking for the family. They were adventure seekers, desert wanderers, drawn to the emptiness. But on that trip, something changed. They stumbled across something in the sand, human remains, bones, scattered, sun-bleached and wind-worn. Nearby, fragments of a wallet, a passport, a shoe, too small for any adult, a child's sunglasses. The past had returned. The remains were confirmed to belong to Egbert and Cornelia, the parents. But there were no signs of the boys, Georg and Max, still missing. Even more disturbing than the discovery was the location. The remains had been found far beyond where anyone thought the family could have walked, more than 11 miles from the car. Through harsh uphill terrain, with no trail, no signs that 4 people had passed through. How had they gotten that far? Why had the children separated from their parents? And again, why had no one found them sooner? The discovery brought pain, not peace, and questions, always more questions. The path from the van to where the remains were found was treacherous. It wasn't a straight line. It twisted through gullies, canyons, and steep ridges. In that heat, most adults would collapse within hours. Carrying a child? Impossible. And yet, the parents had made it that far. What happened to the boys? Had they perished along the way, in a different direction? Had the family split up to try to find help, or had someone found them first? Local authorities hesitated to say. There were too many unknowns. But investigators quietly admitted that the case made less sense the more they uncovered. The items found near the bodies also raised red flags. The passports had been collected in one place, intact. The wallet still contained money. No animals had scattered the remains, which were laid in positions that looked almost deliberate, as if someone had placed the bodies there. If the desert had claimed them naturally, it had done so with eerie precision. The renewed investigation brought media attention once again. Journalists flew in, photographers hiked out. But there were no new leads, no new theories that fit all the facts. The boys' names were whispered again: Georg, Max, 2 children who walked into the most hostile landscape on the continent and were never seen again. Their fate remains unknown. Some believe they perished near their parents, their small bones simply never found. Others believe the truth lies deeper, that the children may have been taken, that someone crossed paths with the family and chose to separate them, that the desert holds more than heat and silence, that sometimes it hides secrets too disturbing to uncover. In the years since, the story has become legend. Hikers walk Anvil Canyon with reverence now. Some leave water bottles near the van's final resting place. Others speak quietly when they pass through, as if not to wake the desert. But it's awake, and it remembers, because while the parents were finally found, the boys never were. And the silence of Death Valley has never sounded more like a warning. In the harsh light of the desert, the truth tends to blister. It peels away the surface stories people tell to make sense of things. This wasn't just a tragedy anymore, it had become something else. A shadow cast long across the American Southwest. A cautionary tale buried in sand and silence. The official explanation had always leaned toward the rational. They were tourists, unfamiliar with the terrain, who made a series of deadly decisions. But for those who knew Death Valley, the kind of people who'd walked its ridges, studied its contours, and respected its dangers, that version of events always felt too clean. No one walks 11 miles in that heat with small children without something pushing them harder than common sense. And still, the boys remained lost. In the absence of answers, the world filled the void with theory. Some believed the children had died earlier, their bodies left behind in a desperate bid for survival. Others whispered about a different possibility, that they were separated by force, that someone had found the family before the desert did. The area where the parents' remains were found had never been properly searched. Not in 1996, and not after. It was remote, so remote that even experienced search teams had written it off as unlikely. The terrain was too rugged, the distance too far. The idea that the family could have ended up there seemed frankly absurd. And yet, that's exactly where they were. The father's remains were partially buried, as if nature had tried to tuck him away. The mother's bones were nearby, exposed but undisturbed. There were no signs of trauma, no signs of animal scavenging, just two silent testimonies, left to erode in the wind. Near the remains, they found items that didn't quite fit the timeline. Cornelia's sunglasses, folded, a single shoe placed nearby. Their water bottles empty but clean. None of it looked panicked. Nothing looked discarded in a rush. It looked placed, deliberate. That detail haunted people. Deliberate. As if someone else had been there at the end. Someone who knew what they were doing. Someone who had a reason for taking only the children. But why? And who? There were no footprints, no tire marks, no signs of other travelers. Just dust scattered across rock, across years. Some locals pointed to nearby areas that had long held a reputation. Remote smuggler routes, illicit trails used to traffic goods and people through the desert. Others spoke of secret military activity, conspiracy, even cults. Theories that sound wild until you realize how easy it is to vanish in a place like this. In the decades since, others have disappeared too. Day hikers, campers, a geologist in 2014, a pilot in 2001. All gone, some found, some not. It's as if the land itself has moods. Some days it watches, other days it takes. But the Death Valley Germans remain its most famous vanishing. The case sits now in the strange limbo that only true, unsolved mysteries occupy. Part truth, part folklore. A real tragedy that reads like fiction. Their story has been featured in documentaries, blogs, survival guides. Their names etched into park ranger reports, into online forums, into the minds of those who can't stop wondering how 4 lives could vanish so completely. And always, always, it comes back to the children. Georg, 10 years old, curious, quiet, eyes like his mother's. Max, just 4. Still clumsy on uneven ground. Still needing to be carried. Still asking, "Are we there yet?" And meaning it. No bones, no shoes, no backpacks, nothing. It's as if the desert took them in and refused to give them back, or maybe it never had them at all. Maybe they walked into something that wasn't just desert heat and bad luck. A wrong place, a wrong time, a wrong person. And now, nearly 3 decades later, their absence still echoes. No one knows what truly happened in those final hours. Whether they collapsed together, holding each other. Whether they split up, driven by desperation. Whether someone watched, waited, and chose that day to act. But people still search. Every few years, someone returns to that spot with a drone, a map, and a theory. They walk the ridgelines, scan the dry washes, dig beneath creosote bushes, hoping to find a bone, a shirt, a child's toy. Something, anything. But they don't. Because some stories aren't just lost, they're swallowed. The Death Valley Germans became more than just a mystery. They became a symbol of how thin the line is between control and chaos, between vacation and disaster, between being found and being forgotten. And until someone finds the boys, that line remains broken. Waiting. Time passed, but the story never faded. You could still hear it whispered around Death Valley, in ranger stations, in bars at the park's edge, among hikers studying old trail maps with a quiet unease. The tale of the German family who vanished was no longer just a cautionary reminder about heat, terrain, and bad luck. It had become something else, an unresolved presence that lingered across the land like a shadow that refuses to be cast away by light. The final discovery in 2009 gave a kind of closure, but it wasn't the kind anyone hoped for. 2 adult skeletons folded into the dirt, 1 passport, a pair of glasses, a shoe, and silence. The boys, Georg and Max, were never found, Not a shred, not a tooth, not a shoe sole or strip of fabric, just gone. And so the questions never stopped. In the years after the bodies were found, journalists and amateur sleuths combed through the case. They dug up search and rescue logs, vehicle rental records, the family's itinerary, and satellite images. They walked the terrain themselves. Some came back with theories, none came back with answers. One theory suggested that the family had become stuck while trying to shortcut across the park. That Egbert and Cornelia had left the van, taking their boys, hoping to reach the China Lake Naval Weapons Center miles away. A dangerous gamble, even for experienced hikers with ample supplies. They weren't experienced, and they had children. Another theory held that the family wasn't alone, that someone had seen them, interacted with them, maybe even helped them, or hurt them. There had always been rumors about criminal activity in that part of the park. Unofficial trails, hidden caches, people who lived off-grid, invisible to the public, that maybe the Moenigs encountered someone they shouldn't have. But there was no proof, only silence. And yet, some of the case details didn't sit right. Why was the van locked, with the keys left inside? Why was the air conditioning knob turned to full, as if someone had been trying to escape the heat just before abandoning it? Why were personal items, including money and passports, left untouched? If they were truly panicked, why did the scene feel so calm? If they were desperate, why was there no sign of chaos? Why were the remains so far from the van? And why weren't the children's remains found with the parents, or anywhere? It was as though the parents had been deliberately placed where they were found, not scattered, not dragged by animals, placed, respectfully, with intention. That alone sent a chill through many who studied the photographs and reports. It didn't feel like nature. It felt like a message. But from who and why? Over the years, Egbert and Cornelia's families in Germany continued to mourn. Their children became frozen in time, one forever 10, the other just 4, in photo albums, in memory, in missing posters yellowed by sun and age. The German government acknowledged the discovery, but never pushed further. The trail was too cold, the location too remote, the years too long. Still, questions remained. How did they get so far? Why did they go that way? And most of all, what happened to the children? Some believe they perished separately, perhaps early in the journey, and were buried by their parents in grief. Others think they may have succumbed later, their remains simply lost in the vast wilderness. But a quiet few believe something else entirely, that someone found the family, that something happened between the van and the final resting place, that the children didn't die, at least not right away. And that's what keeps people awake, that whisper in the wind that says they were taken. Because in the silence of Death Valley, sometimes you can almost hear it, the footsteps that never should have been there, the voices that don't belong, the sound of something watching. The canyon where the van was found is still accessible. A few curious hikers still visit, retracing the last known steps of the Moenig family. They find rusted metal, dry branches, fragments of time. Some leave flowers, others say a prayer. One man once left 2 small teddy bears on a rock near the dry wash. He didn't say why, but everyone knew. For Georg and Max, wherever they are. The land doesn't answer. It never has. But every year it takes more. Another hiker, another story, another mystery that goes unanswered. And maybe that's the truth about Death Valley. It's not just a place. It's a threshold between what we know and what we lose, between reality and legend, between life and the space it leaves behind when it disappears. The Moenigs were real. Their story is real. But how it ended, only the desert knows. And it's not telling. We may never know what really happened in the scorching silence of Death Valley, whether it was a tragic misstep or something far more disturbing. The desert gave back only part of the story, just enough to haunt us, but not enough to understand. 2 parents were found, their journey ending beneath the sun-bleached hills. But two young boys were never seen again. And that's the kind of silence that doesn't fade. It echoes. Across time. Across memory. Across the hollow space where answers should be. If you made it this far, thank you, because stories like this shouldn't be forgotten. They remind us how quickly life can change, how far a family can fall, and how some mysteries stare back at you, waiting. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if this story shook something in you, don't forget to subscribe. There are more stories, and some of them are even stranger.